Spring 2013. A Volkswagen Jetta is cruising down the I-5 highway from Los Angeles to Seattle. In the passenger seat, a researcher from West Virginia University is staring at his laptop screen. There's a tangle of tubes running from the trunk, snaking under the seat, connecting to a portable emissions analyzer mounted in the back. The tubes feed directly into the car's exhaust pipe. He's not looking for a scandal. He's looking for a hero. His team was hired by an environmental nonprofit, the International Council on Clean Transportation. Europe is choking on smog, and they want ammunition to force European lawmakers to adopt stricter pollution standards. They need a shining example of a car that does it right, something they can hold up and say, "See, this is possible. You have no excuse." They chose Volkswagen. VW has spent hundreds of millions of dollars over the past decade marketing their American clean diesel models as engineering miracles. Cars that deliver power, fuel economy, and clean air all at once. The researchers are planning to write a glowing report praising VW and shaming Europe into following their lead. The data starts streaming in from the exhaust pipe. The researcher leans forward. He frowns. He taps the screen. The numbers don't make sense. The car isn't running clean. It's spewing nitrogen oxide, NOx, a highly toxic gas that causes smog, asthma, and respiratory failure. At 35 to 40 times the legal limit, he assumes the equipment is broken. They pull over on the shoulder, check the tubes, recalibrate the sensors, run the test again. Same result. They drive to a different city and test a second Volkswagen diesel. Same horrifying numbers. Their equipment isn't broken. The cars are. But when they pull up the official EPA testing records, these exact same cars passed emissions tests with perfect scores every single time. It doesn't make physical sense. A car can't be spotless in a government lab and a rolling toxic hazard on the highway. The laws of chemistry don't work that way, unless the car somehow knows when it's being tested. I'm James Tudor. This is the file on the defeat device. To understand why Volkswagen built a machine designed to lie, you have to understand their ambition. In the mid-2000s, Volkswagen wasn't satisfied being a major player. They wanted to become the largest car manufacturer on Earth. To do that, they had to conquer the American market. But American consumers loved big, powerful engines, and the US government had some of the strictest emissions laws in the world. VW's solution was clean diesel. The pitch was seductive. All the torque and fuel efficiency of diesel, but with emissions so low you could feel good about driving it. But there's a fundamental problem with diesel physics. If you tune a diesel engine to deliver great gas mileage and high performance, it runs incredibly hot. And when a diesel engine runs hot, it produces massive amounts of nitrogen oxide, NOx. NOx is a nasty pollutant. It causes asthma, chronic respiratory illness, and premature death. It's one of the main ingredients in smog. To scrub NOx out of diesel exhaust, most car companies used a chemical injection system called urea, also known as AdBlue in Europe, or diesel exhaust fluid in the US. Urea systems work, but they're expensive. They require a bulky tank in the trunk, and drivers have to refill them regularly, like adding windshield wiper fluid, except for pollution control. VW executives looked at the urea systems and said no. They told their engineers, "We want the power. We want the fuel economy. We want to pass the EPA emissions tests. And we refuse to use expensive, inconvenient urea tanks. Do it with software." The engineers looked at the laws of thermodynamics. It was impossible. You couldn't have high performance and clean air at the same time without chemical scrubbers. So, unable to bend the laws of physics, the engineers decided to bend the code instead. Deep inside Volkswagen's engineering headquarters in Wolfsburg, Germany, a team of software developers wrote a few lines of code into the engine control unit, the computer brain that manages every aspect of a modern car's performance. Internally, they called this specific string of code the acoustic condition. The EPA would later give it a much harsher name, a defeat device. It was a masterpiece of digital deception. The software was programmed to constantly monitor the car's sensors, dozens of them, feeding data every fraction of a second to answer one single question. Am I in a government testing laboratory right now? When the EPA tests a car for emissions compliance, they don't take it out on the open road. They put it on a dynamometer, essentially a giant treadmill for cars. The wheels spin, but the car stays perfectly still. The VW software was designed to recognize that exact scenario. It looked for highly specific variables. Is the steering wheel locked in a perfectly straight position? Are the front wheels turning, but the rear wheels stationary? Is the car accelerating in a smooth, unnaturally predictable curve? Are the doors open? Is the barometric pressure stable? If all those conditions aligned, the software knew, I'm being tested. It would trigger what engineers called dyno mode, or test mode. The car's computer would instantly choke the engine. It would drastically reduce fuel injection, killing the car's performance and fuel economy, but scrubbing the exhaust nearly clean. EPA technicians would run their standardized tests, look at their monitors, and see a perfectly green, eco-friendly vehicle. Low NOx, low particulates, everything within legal limits. They'd stamp it approved and send it on its way. The car had passed. The system worked. But the second that car rolled off the government testing treadmill and out onto a real street with a real driver, the parameters changed. The driver would turn the steering wheel just 1 degree to the left. The software would recognize the change instantly. It knew it was no longer being watched by regulators. In a fraction of a second, faster than a human could blink, the code would flip the car from test mode to road mode. The emissions controls were shut off completely. The engine was unleashed. The driver got exactly what they paid for. Incredible horsepower, amazing fuel economy. A smooth, powerful ride, but out of the tailpipe, invisible to the driver, the car was quietly vomiting up to 40 times the legal limit of toxic nitrogen oxide directly into the atmosphere. Every mile, every day. Volkswagen sold 11 million of these cars around the world, 500,000 of them in the United States alone. They ran massive advertising campaigns during the Super Bowl, touting their environmental friendliness. They won Green Car of the Year awards from major publications. They collected billions of dollars from consumers who genuinely thought they were buying an eco-friendly vehicle that was good for the planet. And every single time one of those drivers turned the key in the ignition, a hidden algorithm was actively poisoning the air that everyone around them had to breathe. When the researchers from West Virginia University published their terrifying highway emissions data in 2014, the EPA and the California Air Resources Board confronted Volkswagen directly. VW's response was textbook corporate denial. They didn't confess. They blamed technical glitches. They said the researchers' portable testing equipment must have been calibrated incorrectly. They told government regulators that there were just minor, unintentional anomalies caused by differences in testing conditions, temperature, humidity, altitude. Nothing deliberate, nothing sinister. For over a year, top Volkswagen executives sat in conference rooms with federal regulators and lied directly to their faces. They knew the defeat device was written into the source code of millions of cars. They knew exactly what it did and why it was there. They even issued a software recall in early 2015 that they claimed would fix the emissions problem. It didn't. All it did was tweak the defeat device algorithm slightly to make it even harder to detect during real-world testing. But the regulators didn't back down. They kept digging. They ran more tests. The numbers didn't add up. Finally, in September 2015, the EPA and CARB threatened to withhold certification for all 2016 Volkswagen diesel models. They were about to lock VW out of the American market entirely. That's when the wall cracked. A lower-level engineer, facing enormous pressure and the possibility of personal criminal liability, finally broke. He admitted the truth. The acoustic condition software existed. It had always existed. It was intentional. The conspiracy collapsed overnight. The fallout was catastrophic. This wasn't a simple recall over faulty airbags or defective brakes. This was deliberate, systematic, engineered fraud, orchestrated at the highest levels of one of the largest corporations in the world. Volkswagen eventually pleaded guilty to criminal charges of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and making false statements. They were forced to pay over $30 billion in fines, penalties, legal settlements, and vehicle buybacks. It remains one of the largest corporate penalties in history. Several top executives were indicted on criminal charges. Some fled the country to avoid prosecution. Others, including a senior VW executive named Oliver Schmidt, were arrested and sentenced to years in federal prison. But the true cost of the defeat device wasn't measured in dollars or prison sentences. Researchers at MIT and Harvard later conducted detailed studies to calculate the environmental and public health impact of those 11 million cars secretly spewing toxic emissions for nearly a decade. They estimated that the excess pollution generated by Volkswagen's fraud directly contributed to approximately 1,200 premature deaths worldwide, primarily from respiratory illness, heart disease, and lung cancer caused by long-term NOx exposure. 1,200 people dead because a corporation decided that profit margins and market share were more important than breathable air. Today, modern cars are less like mechanical machines and more like computers on wheels. They're controlled by millions of lines of code running invisibly in the background. The Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal is the ultimate warning for the software age. It proved that when a corporation values market dominance over human life, the most dangerous weapon they have isn't a faulty mechanical part or a flawed design. It's a few lines of invisible code, hidden in the dark, programmed to lie. I'm James Tudor. This is Empire Archives. Subscribe.